So let's look a little bit deeper into pen testing, and in this part we'll look at some practical scanning using Nessus. So it's important that we understand the terminology used with inside testing and security infrastructures. A risk is the likelihood of an occurrence of something that could do harm and cause some sort of loss or damage. So it's often defined in some sort of probability, some sort of definition of attacks per year and so on. Then we have our threat, which is something that can cause harm. We have our asset, which is something that an organization owns. And then it's a vulnerability. We have a vulnerability, which is really just a weakness of a system, and an exploit is really something to take advantage of any weaknesses there are. Okay, so we can use a range of tools to be able to perform our security evaluation. Nmap, HPing we've seen. In this lecture we'll look at Nessus as a scanning tool. But we do our scans either on a white box, a grey box, or a black box. A black box, we know nothing about the infrastructure. So perhaps we need to understand the taxonomy around a security incident. So some sort of threat is achieved by an attack tool for certain vulnerabilities with an access which results in something for certain objectives. So the threat might be a hacker, spies, or so on. The attack tools could be scripting tools, a toolkit. Vulnerabilities could be something to do with the design of the infrastructure, a incorrectly configured device. And the access could be related to files or data. And the results could be a denial of service, a theft. And there are certain objectives of why someone would actually perform the security incident. So in terms of the testing of security, we often would define them in terms of two main areas. We have certain objectives that we're trying to analyze. So the risks might relate to an adverse disclosure, such as a loss of data. Service availability, we may want to make sure that our systems are up and accessible as long as we can. It could be business disruption, damage or modification to assets, reputational damage, and a legal and regulatory censure. And the threats might relate to malware, hacking, a social threat, misuse, and our actors might be internal to our own network, external, or trusted partners. So we typically split into two main areas that we would do. One is some sort of automated technical assessment of our security infrastructure, looking for vulnerabilities and open ports and so on. So that might involve port scanning, malware detection, SQL data exploits, and so on. But this can only show us part of it. And really the main focus for the proper pen test is to take an adversarial role. And really that's where someone understands the business, the organizational objectives and their infrastructure, and really takes an adversarial role to actually try and see if they can breach any vulnerabilities. So it might be to do with social engineering, password cracking, data theft, and so on. So in this part of this lecture, we'll look at the technical scanning for with Nessus. In terms of vulnerabilities, there are well-known vulnerabilities which are posted, and one is known as US CERT. And with a US CERT, we have a vulnerability note, which will actually define a number, and then it'll give you an overview about how it's caused, what the vulnerability is, and then it will give an impact statement about it and a solution. We'll also define the vendors that are actually affected by it too. Along with that, we also get a CVE number. In this case, we have again a summary. We have the ID, summary, and then when it's published, and also the severity of the vulnerability. It's important that we understand these vulnerabilities and patch systems as required. So one method that we can use to be able to assess our vulnerabilities is to use Nessus. Nessus is an automated tool to be able to perform a technical assessment of our security. So what we'll do is we'll just start up Nessus. Nessus is a web client which talks to an agent on the machine, which will then perform the test. And at the same time, what we'll do is that we'll just run up Metasploit. I think it's actually running. Okay, so Metasploit is running, and Metasploit has a whole lot of vulnerabilities associated with it that we can train on. So Metasploit is running, and the IP address is 192.168.47.133. So the first thing that we do is we define a policy. So we can take certain standard policies, but let's just add our own new policy. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at port scanning. And so let's focus on ports 1 to 110. If we want to, we can create a Microsoft account for a domain and log in, and then we get a whole lot of vulnerabilities we can search for. So in this case, there's 310 vulnerabilities for our database scanning. So it can take quite a while. So what we'll do is we'll disable them all, and then we'll just go for one of these. And again, we can log into a domain controller to do our assessments on a corporate type environment. So that's our port scanning and new policy. Okay, so all I've done really is it'll do a scan, and I'll also check for backdoors. Okay, so we'll just save that. That's fine. And then what we do is we create a new scanned template. And we can do a whole range of hosts if we want, but let's just do our Metasploit image. So it's 47133. Okay, and we select our policy here. So I think that's the one we've just created, hopefully. We then run the scan. It's going to take a while. And eventually our results will appear here, and you can see it's just running just now. Okay, so we're just getting some information back just now. It's not actually finished the scan. But we'll go to one that was fairly well completed. So then it gives us basically a color-coded result. So in this case, these are the critical ones. There's an unsupported operating system. There's a backdoor on the VM. We have anonymous FTP enabled, and so on. And I will try to classify them in terms of the threat level associated with them. But this one here is a remote access, similar to a desktop type access for VNC. And we can see password has been used for the password. So this gives us an example here. And our scan is now complete. Okay, but if we look back at the other one, it gives us a more complete scan, that this was a larger scan that was undertaken. And we can obviously export our results into some sort of executive summary. And the good thing is it will give us a description of the threat. And there's the CVE that's associated with this one, just as we defined. And there's the other reference numbers that we want. And it also gives us an impact statement there. Okay, so that gives an overview of Nessus. Nice package to be able to do our scanning. Okay, so if you remember, we created a policy, we then created a scan template, we used the policy within the scan template, and then we ran it. Obviously, once you've actually done your policy and your scan, then you can obviously automate these scans on a weekly or a monthly basis. Okay, so we've given an overview of some of the basics of pen testing, and with a focus on using Nessus.